All right. Well, now, Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is a Wednesday, hump day. Yes. And I always say this, it is sort of a nice day for me. And I'll tell you something else that's been nice. I had to take a couple folks out of Halitics, and I was sorry to do it. I'm still sorry. And nothing's permanent. I'll bring them back in. If they're watching and they want to come back, they can come back. They just have to be civil. We have to have civil discourse, or there's no discourse. It's civil or none. And I have to say, having not uncivil discourse, right? That's a lot of negatives. Having civil discourse, not having uncivil discourse is pleasant for me. I always get a little nervous, trepidatious seeing certain people's posts and worrying that there's going to be something there that's a personal attack rather than addressing politics, rather than addressing policy issues. And I'm not talking about personally attacking politicians, bold-faced names. I was thinking a lot about this. If someone goes after one of my, I guess, I don't know want to say heroes, but a politician I do respect, like when they go after people like Jill Stein, I don't like it. But if you're going to go after Stein, make it about her policies, right? I don't like this policy. I don't like that policy. And even folks saying, well, you shouldn't call Trump a fascist because that's not really about policy. I hear that. But I think we've seen enough evidence rounding up people, targeting them. By the way, great post on this exact topic by Socrates Speaks. Actually, not by Socrates, but by his current iteration, Jack Quirk. I'll have to have Jack on. Jack, I reach out to him. Maybe we'll get him back on the program. Friend of Halitics. He does a great Socrates Speaks about why that's his Substack. Socrates Speaks. I think it's Substack. What Trump is doing with respect to the immigrant roundups, the targeting of brown people, darker skinned people, going after folks and restaurants, at the Home Depot parking lot, working car washes is just so wrong-headed. And I would argue certainly fascistic. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me, 240-242-5646. I was trying to figure out exactly what I was going to use as my thumbnail when I saw in my inbox a column by Anand Giridharadas. I still can't get that name. Let's just call him Anand G. And he is talking about how great he and, Ro Khanna is, and how progressives should respond to the Charlie Kirk shooting and the anger that we're seeing on the right. And I just thought their response really just failed. I mean, I thought it was a faux aggressive because platitudinous, failing to address the legitimate grievances on the right. I went after, or let me put it a different way, the legitimate grievances of many Trump voters, of many Charlie Kirk supporters. They just clearly fail to provide a compelling or even rational, answer to the specific economic dislocation that is being felt around the country. And I call it progressive because what they do offer is non-threatening to elites. If you want to be progressive, you have to be foursquare in support of true wealth and income redistribution. You have to take on the billionaires. And perhaps because they themselves are, I believe, certainly Ro Khanna's net worth is in the millions, maybe in the tens of millions, somewhere in that range. And Giridharadas, who's a frequent media personality, is interviewed, I'm sure Substack's doing well, used to be a contributor for MSNBC, maybe he still is. I'm sure he's doing quite well himself. So they see themselves, at least economically, and they are indeed economically closer to the elites than to the poor, struggling workers who are so upset, so angry, so resentful in many cases. And I think maybe that's why they don't challenge elites. Maybe it's because they know where their bread is buttered going forward and they don't want to risk their future. But it's very, very disappointing for me, because what we need progressive populist leaders. We need folks who are going to go out there and say the problem we have in this country is there's far too much inequality. There's far too much poverty. There's far too much dislocation. There's far too much insecurity. And those are real. Those reflect the reality of life in America today. It's unfair. The system is rigged. And we, if you elect us, will do everything we can to unrig it. That's the only way. That is the only way to defeat Trumpism, Kirkism, call it what you will. That's the only way. Warmongering. You could call it Bidenism if you want. I mean, the only way we're going to be able to take our country back is through a full-throated embrace of true wealth and income redistribution down. We see the fruits of this extraordinarily unequal, unjust society in our cruel, inhumane, soulless foreign policy, for sure. Gaza death toll now over 65,000 as Israel continues genocidal war on Palestinians. I don't know how the death toll isn't 10 times that. Seriously, what did we read yesterday in terms of the evidence that this is genocide? 90% of the buildings destroyed, I believe, in Gaza. Virtually an equal number of people whose homes have been destroyed. There's almost, there's no standing buildings left. You can just see the images. Now the Israeli army is occupying Gaza City. So the death toll going back up, 198 yesterday, reported in the past 24 hours as Israel is occupying Gaza City. And there's nothing that Trump's doing to stop that. Not one word of, questioning, not challenge, no public statements against it. Just, whatever. Israel, go do your worst. Bring hell on Palestine. Since October 7, Israel and the U.S. have killed a minimum of 65,062 Gazans, including 98 reported dead yesterday. And you can see Trump, Netanyahu, those two are responsible for 12,500 since Trump took office, including probably over 6,000 women and children. An absolutely ugly, horrific atrocity comprising many, many atrocities committed by Israel and the United States. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. 240-242-5646. Would love to hear from you. I'm looking in the chat. I'll try to get any chat comments out to you if I see any. Don't see any at this moment, but sometimes people join after a few moments. And again, I am taking the calls as well Wednesday between noon and 1 East Coast time. I don't believe there's really going to be, I don't know how we can have a solution that will leave us in less than a worse place, except if somehow we figure out a way to unite behind, as I just said, progressive populist candidates. I hope, I'm semi-optimistic that we do have an opportunity to make a difference in a really important election. I mean, this isn't just like, dog catcher. This isn't, agriculture commissioner. And that's important. I'm not saying those jobs aren't important, but mayor of the city of New York is a big deal, right? I mean, you're the executive, so you have a lot of power in that city. And New York City is obviously, I don't think that anyone would argue, by a wide measure, the most important city in really perhaps in the world. I mean, you could throw Washington, D.C. in there, but it's so much smaller, and its importance is based more on the fact that the federal government, obviously, that's why it's important. The federal government is here. The mayor of Washington, D.C. doesn't have really any power over the federal government, whereas the federal government exercises very stringent oversight in many cases, and we're seeing it right now over the mayor of D.C. So of mayors, there's no question that the New York City chief executive is the most important in the country by a wide margin. And we can see here Zohran Mamdani, my choice, has a commanding lead. This poll just released today, so this is breaking. Yesterday. You can see it Tuesday, September 16th, last night. We didn't have it available to us yesterday. I did check my Google today to see if there were any new polls in New York, and lo and behold, there was. So it looks like Mamdani is, not a shoo-in. I would not say that, but at this point, let me say it this way. I've said since the Democratic primary results were in the books, since it was announced that Mamdani had won the Democratic primary in New York, I've been saying I'd rather be him. If my goal is to win the election, I'd rather be Mamdani than Andrew Cuomo, Eric Adams, or Curtis Sliwa. There was a moment when there was a little hedging there when I saw one poll that suggested, and I think it was a reasonably credible poll too, that suggested that in a head-to-head race, Mamdani was still ahead, but among registered voters, I think this may have been a Gotham poll, maybe it was New York City Siena poll, I'm not sure which, among just registered voters in a head-to-head match, Cuomo was actually ahead by a couple of points. That got me a little nervous. There was the fear that maybe Sliwa and Adams could drop out. There would be a concerted effort by the Democratic Party, elites even, to shepherd folks into the Cuomo camp. That was a concern. It has not transpired that way at all. You can see here among likely voters with the four candidates, Mamdani has a really, I don't believe it's bridgeable. He has an unbridgeable gap over Cuomo here, 21. This is Marist poll of their credible pollster, and this is consistent. One of the comments made by Eyewitness News ABC was that all the polls are showing the same thing. Mamdani, 19%, 20%, 21% lead. There's really no outliers even. There's no poll that really shows Cuomo with anywhere near a striking chance of getting to Mamdani, at least when you look at the likely voters, and you see the same thing here. Mamdani with a 21-point lead over Cuomo, and only 5% undecided. So, unless something is very, very off with the pollsters or some news comes out, and it's hard to see what it would be since so many New Yorkers can't stand Andrew Cuomo, it's hard to see how Cuomo could possibly catch Mamdani in a race with the four candidates who are all still in it. If you look at registered voters, that's where Mamdani's had a little bit of a drop-off compared to the likely voters. That may be some of the poorest voters in the city, those who are least likely to vote, tend to be more pro-Cuomo. It's hard to understand why. I talked about this yesterday with a friend of Halitics. Was it yesterday? No, it was Monday. I'm sorry. We talked about this on Monday with friend of Halitics, Carlos Childs, I do, say, hey, that was a good video. I would urge you to check it out. That, for some reason, many African Americans seem to prefer Cuomo, and they constitute a disproportionate number of the poorest New Yorkers. Nevertheless, even here, Mamdani holds a 20-point lead over Cuomo with registered voters. And although there's a significant number of undecided, 9%, even if you give all of them to Cuomo, he's still behind by over 10 percentage points. So it just doesn't look possible. I need to show you one more chart I put together. Basically, I just cut and pasted results from the Marist top lines. They provide them. They actually provide not just the top lines, the whole poll, and that's what I use. Here is just a little bit more. This is when you have a head-to-head, right? Because that's the other fear, I guess. What if Sliwa and Adams drop out? They both endorse Cuomo, I'm sorry. They both endorse Cuomo. Even there, among likely voters, Mamdani with a 10-point lead, undecided 5%. Cuomo can't bridge that. 49%, very close to 50%. The worst case scenario under the Marist poll is if you look only at registered voters and you give all the undecided to Cuomo, he barely catches Mamdani. It's 47%. That seems extremely unlikely event. So even in the absolute worst case scenario for Mamdani, Cuomo should lose, and that's what we want. That's exactly what I think we all want. I don't know who doesn't want that. 240-242-5646. Hey, Ari, good to see you in the chat there. Gen Zs are maybe more open to, I guess, democratic socialism, I think is what he's saying. Let me just see if I can adjust this a little bit, get myself a little bit better there. I was a little bit blocked by the mic. You know what's pretty cool? I can move that mic around without a lot of noise. We're seeing, support coalesce to the extent it hadn't already, and it mostly had behind Zoran. That's really, really good. In terms of when I say coalesce, I mean among voters, New York City voters. But even the Democratic establishment, in some instances, seems to be coming around to support Zoran. Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York State, and I believe she's relatively popular, although she will be facing Stefanik, right? At least Stefanik, who's a hard right, uber Zionist, upstate New York, very, very right wing. Concerning, she seems to have maybe 8 to 10 point behind deficit there, and that's not huge. I think Hochul will hold her lead, but our revolution, they're trying to fundraise off of this race. That's what I'm seeing here. Anyway, we need to put massive pressure to get other top party leaders on board, as Kathy Hochul's endorsement, according to Our Revolution, hasn't moved the needle for Zoran. So let me start, because we call this program, this is another one of my progressives. I do those somewhat regularly, rather. So the progressive, pointing to folks who claim the progressive mantle but really aren't. And the main targets being in this program, Ro Khanna and Anand G. I'm going to always forget that. I want to say his full name and I can't do it. Anand G. But Our Revolution kind of has to fit that bill too, because why are they trying to put pressure to get other top party leaders on board? You don't want to support him, Hakeem Jeffries. You don't want to support Mamdani, Chuck Schumer. We get it. You're corporatist. You're corrupt. You're warmongers. You're Zion Nazis. So of course you're not going to support Mamdani. We get it. We don't care. Don't support him. He'll win without your support, and we're going to take you down. That should be the goal of Our Revolution, not to try to cajole and arm twist centrist, center-right Dems to endorse somebody they obviously are extraordinarily uncomfortable with. And if they did endorse him, it would just be a fake endorsement anyway. It would be a meaningless endorsement. What you should be doing, Our Revolution, is using the incredibly hypocritical stance of Jeffries and Schumer, who consistently say any blue will do. You have to support the Democratic nominee, regardless of what you really think of them, because the alternative is just so awful. There's always the fear mongering among the centrist Dems, including Schumer and Jeffries, in support of really bad candidates, people like Biden, people like Harris, people like Hillary Clinton. So the point shouldn't be of Our Revolution, we need to get these fake, corrupt leaders on board. It should be, we got to take them down. They should be raising money to primary Jeffries and Schumer to defeat them at the ballot box. But again, they're progressive. They're not about electing the best possible leaders. It's very, very frustrating. Now, they say, it's interesting, because Our Revolution makes the point in their slot. Let me show it one more time, because this struck me. You can see it at the bottom, the bold. Kathy Hochul's endorsement hasn't moved the needle for Zoran. Well, I thought that was odd, because the latest Marist poll shows the needle has moved a little bit toward. Now he's already leading. It's not like he was losing his lead before that poll appeared, but if anything, that poll showed Zoran coming up even more, especially among the registered voters. Even in a head-to-head, Zoran wins by a comfortable margin. So it does seem that Hochul's endorsement made a bit of a difference. And the Eyewitness News report that that told us about the poll in the first place, they note it has made a difference. Look at this. The poll comes days after Hochul endorsed Mamdani, and it appears that her endorsement swayed Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie, who is now expected to publicly voice support for his fellow assemblyman, meaning Mamdani, by the end of this week. Now, Heastie's much more center. He's a centrist. But Heastie has said in the past that he really respects Zoran. He believes Zoran was a good assembly member for his Queens district and fought hard for his constituents, even though they didn't always agree. And he also pushed back against a claim in the New York Times that Zoran Mamdani's support for some type of free bus pilot program had caused legislation not to be passed. And he said that had nothing to do with it. Shut up. Even though I didn't support the legislation that Zoran did, he did not commit some sort of strategic error that led to the failure of the bill. So again, New York Times getting it wrong. Looks like Heastie will endorse Mamdani. Perhaps, not definitely, perhaps. It says, according to Eyewitness News, I think he would have endorsed him anyway, I'll be honest with you. But Eyewitness News is saying it does appear to have swayed Heastie. So I don't know where our revolution would get the idea that it's having no effect. But I get why they would say it. I don't know whether they believe it, because they're trying to raise money. And it starts to really rankle. Now, I work for them. I get it. I got a salary. I wanted to get that salary. So I get you want to raise money. I understand it. But is this the best use of your money as a donor? If you want to elect Mamdani, is that the best use? I would say maybe a better use is to give the campaign. Now, that said, I'm not going to cast aspersions. They do make phone calls. They do send out texts. So maybe it makes a difference. Maybe it really does. So I'm not going to say no. I think at this point, this may not be the best use of money, but I'm not going to go state that for the record. If I was going to give to help elect Zoran Mamdani, I'd probably just give to the Mamdani campaign. Honestly, I don't know that it's necessary at this point. One more comment here, which I think calls into question our revolution strategy. And that is, by the way, I'm not going to criticize that group for the texts and the calls. I think it makes a difference. Look, you knock on doors, you hope some of the people that you touch, you make a touch, it makes a difference. So that's the hope, what we hope. The comment by Cuomo is interesting. He downplays Hochul's endorsement. It doesn't mean anything, he says. And why didn't he endorse her, by the way, is his other comment. He's like, well, she endorsed him. Shouldn't he endorse her in her run for governor? Now, to me, both of those responses are wrong. I think he said, I understand why he made them. He's like, oh, it doesn't matter. You know why it matters? It mattered if she had endorsed Cuomo in the general versus Sliwa. If let's say Cuomo had won the primary and Hochul endorsed him, it wouldn't make a difference because everyone would think, okay, centrist endorses centrist. Corporate M endorses corporate M. Pretty meaningless, right? But the people who are considering Mamdani but aren't sure yet, right? They're kind of on the fence. They're maybe undecided, maybe leaning one way or the other. A lot of those folks are the upper middle class, lower upper class, right? Because there's like the upper middle class and then there's the lower upper class. In New York City, you make $300,000, you're just lower upper class, right? I think you got to be $800,000 to be upper class in New York City, because you could easily spend $100,000 on rent every year. You can. I mean, it's just that simple. It's not to have some sort of lavish luxury apartment. An okay 3-bedroom, it could run you $8,000. That's $96,000. It's $300,000 before taxes, $225,000 after taxes. $96,000 of that, well over a third is going to your rent. So you could be lower upper class in New York City. You're not rich. You're not sure for whom to vote. You read the New York Times. You voted for Kamala Harris. You're centrist, pretty much. You see yourself as a centrist. Life has been good to you, but not as good as you thought it would be. You worked really hard in school. You got great grades. And you went to a good law school, or we went to medical school, or you're a broker. You're in the financial industry. You're a techie. You make a good living, but your life ain't even that great. You work 60 hours a week. And you're getting by, and maybe you're putting a little bit in the bank, but not that much. You don't foresee the kind of affluent lifestyle you believe you deserve for all your hard work. And the governor that you respect comes out and says, I'm okay with Mamdani. And you say to yourself, well, he wants to make the city more affordable. That's what she says. You want the city to be more affordable. You don't like all the talk about socialized grocery stores and all that stuff. Why do we need to spend money putting a grocery store in Harlem or in the South Bronx? I've got a Gristedes around the corner. That's fine. I don't know what we need these city-owned groceries for. I get, so that's the attitude that these folks may have. But at the same time, they're paying so much in rent. They're thinking maybe we do need more rent control. So they're kind of on the fence. The governor says, I'm okay with Mamdani. That makes a difference for these people. So for Mamdani, it's going to make a difference. And then Cuomo says, I was surprised she endorsed him, but he didn't endorse her. So he's kind of like a dig at Hochul, right? Like, what did you get for your endorsement? Well, obviously this is, in the moment you're thinking, yeah, he's kind of ungrateful, right? Why he should do, turn about his fair play. Okay, first of all, if he the next day said, oh yeah, and I'm for her too, it would look ridiculous. It would clearly look like tit for tat, quid pro quo, and it would reduce the power for endorsement. It wouldn't amplify it. It would hurt it. It would just look like two politicians, both, doing what they can for themselves. Look like they were acting out of pure self-interest. So obviously, Mamdani can't the next day endorse Hochul. It's different like if you have a ranked choice voting race like Lander and Mamdani both say to endorse the other, vote the other one number 2. That I get. Obviously, that makes sense. It doesn't work here. And I would point out also, and I think people get this, the mayoral race, the election is in just a couple of months, less than 2 months away. Whereas the governor's primary isn't, I think it's in April next year, unless New York moved it. Maybe it's not even till June. The mayor's primary was in June, but I think the governor's may be earlier. I'm not sure, to coincide with the midterms. Unclear. If Mamdani's got plenty of time to endorse Hochul. This is ridiculous for him, but that's Cuomo. He'll look for any little wedge he can jam in there to try, obviously to dismiss Mamdani. But I think he gets that he's behind. Okay, let's move on. The Kirk story will not go away. I was going to use a different word, but I won't, because it'd be a little bit, I guess, callous to say what I almost said. It will not go away. And the big reason it won't go away is because the righties, by the way, hey, hey, both parties, I don't get that. Please 2 thumbs up. What does that mean? Please 2 thumbs up. I don't quite understand that, but okay. I'm sure it's positive. The Trump administration using the assassination of Charlie Kirk for all it's worth to divide us, clearly to foment violence, anger, to use it for political gain for himself. And we saw this obviously on January 6th as well. Clearly, there's the threat that if something happens that we don't like politically, we're going to retaliate on the right. And that's what you see right here. Trump says it will target far left groups for Kirk's assassination, even though there has still been no link, despite all we hear. I know I saw videos posted, he must have been activated by, all the talk that Trump is a fascist. He said, catch this fascist. Well, first of all, that relates to a video game, apparently. That's gamer culture. They use that term, catch this fascist, all the time. So I don't see how that is some sort of smoking gun, if you will, that Tyler Robinson was activated by far left propaganda. I heard Scott Jennings say over and over, the left does is call Trump a fascist, call him a fascist. Well, you know what? We have free speech in this country. You're allowed to call leaders fascists without being accused of being a murderer or for that matter, fomenting violence. And the claims that Trump is a fascist are almost always accompanied by evidence, facts. Now, I've always been a little bit skeptical. I don't like to use the word fascist necessarily, but more recently I have said, yes, the worst, and I've said this over and over about Trump, especially the first administration, rounding up immigrants, targeting immigrants is clearly fascist. It's the way it's done, rounding people up, sending them on planes without giving them hearings. I know there's some court decision, and now apparently where we hear that Trump is complying with it. That's fascism. Separating families. There's a story in the New York Times that the people incarcerated by ICE are giving up all hope. There are numerous suicide attempts. These aren't people who necessarily committed violent crime. Maybe some did, I don't know. Others just arrested because they spoke out against this administration. That's wrong. That's fascism. It's ugly. Trying to reverse an election, refusing to accept a legit election, which was the case in 2020 when Trump, did everything he possibly could to stay in office, contrary to the law. That's fascism. So if you don't like it, then you don't like Trump being called that name, then explain why you don't think he is a fascist. Don't say, well, you use all these words and it's going to piss people off. Well, yeah, it is. That's why, by the way, you shouldn't have guns just readily available, because yes, rhetoric does cause people's anger and resentment. And you know what causes that? Let's see if we can. So you want to talk about violent rhetoric that could activate people? How about what rhetoric is coming from the Trump administration? How about from his policy advisor there, Stephen Miller, just a guy whose policies really are reminiscent of the Nazis, just total race bait or immigrant phobic, xenophobic, defending the cruelest treatment of people, of immigrants. What is the terms he used? It's a vast terror movement. He's saying there's not even any connection drawn between left podcasters, I guess, like myself and others. There's not even any connection drawn between us and the actions taken by Tyler Robinson. And yet he calls it a vast domestic terror movement. Where's the terrorism that you're talking about? What? Give me an example. One. And then he goes on to say, with God as my witness. So invoking religion, which is often a fascistic ploy. We will disrupt, dismantle, and destroy these networks and make America safe again for the American people. And in Charlie's name, in the martyr Charlie's name, that's incredibly violent inducing rhetoric. There's no question. That's the kind of language that is going to rev people up, that is going to cause them to consider taking up arms against those whose opinions they don't like, whose statements they disagree with. What did Tyler Robinson actually state? Why did he do it? This is according to the Justice Department, which does not identify, some sort of hate speech online. No, Robinson says it was Kirk's hatred. Why did I do it? I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out. And I think that's a really important statement. What he's saying, as I understand that, is, hey, Kirk had his shtick, right? He would go on college campuses and he would demonize gays and trans people and affirmative action and all this. He would, and maybe demonize is too strong, but he would go after people based on identity. And, I get where Kirk was coming from to a small degree. I do. I think he identifies issues that are problematic. But his rhetoric, his language was, again, so divisive and broke people apart who should be ultimately on the same side, fighting for a better America. He did just the opposite. His work was designed to maintain and enhance the function that Charlie Kirk, the role he played, his function ultimately was to maintain the power and wealth of the elites by keeping everyone below them at each other's throats, rather than by leading a movement of poor, struggling, working people against the billionaire class. Now, I made this same critique against some on the left, right? I think that's fair to say. If you're a cultural warrior, if your focus is solely on identity rather than on poverty, rather than on class, then you're playing the same role. You're dividing people by identity rather than by economic need. And that is the problem. That's why we are where we are. But Robinson's saying, you can't argue with Kirk. He's not going to change his opinion. You can't negotiate with him. It's there. It's not a bug. It's a feature of Charlie Kirk. Now, of course, that doesn't justify killing him. I would never say that. It's not right. Killing is not right. But here's somebody who didn't have a lot of power, who was hurt. Apparently, I would assume the roommate was, by reports, transitioning and was his romantic partner, meaning Tyler Robinson's romantic partner is a roommate. And he was triggered by the fact that he saw Kirk going after him. That supposedly, according to many on the right, that proves he was some kind of left-wing, tool. He had been blue-pilled or whatever the term is. I don't see that. I don't see that at all. I see it as somebody who sees their love being attacked and is, like many of us, then sees red. And it has nothing to do with Kirk's political leanings or left wing versus right, except to the extent that Kirk used transphobic and anti-trans rhetoric as part of his his gig, whatever, part of his performance in college, at college campuses. And that is certainly more on the right. We see that on the right, not on the left, to a much greater degree. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. 240-242-5646. So what Ari has to say, real quick comment. I tend to suspect people like Kirk with big follower numbers will adjust their views according to what seems popular among their constituents, like many politicians possibly. So seeing the MAGA crowd be very intrigued with Epstein situation, he was following the crowd, a real leader, not in my opinion. I didn't know Kirk said anything about Epstein. I know he was, at least willing to entertain views that were critical of Israel that he had never before been. I wasn't clear on his views on Epstein. Maybe he was turning against Trump on that as well. Well, if he was, good. Charlie Kirk, ultimately, in my view, was a grifter. He identified an area where he could activate people, he could excite them, he could rally them, and he could profit from doing that. And in the end, not help them. But he also did provide policy prescriptions, policy ideas that addressed, maybe not in a way that I think would be ultimately effective, and certainly not in a way that I feel were humane, but to a degree would address the economic dislocation potential, the paucity of opportunities for so many Americans at this point, the declining standard of living in much of America, the increasing unaffordability, the inability even to ever perceive yourself as being able to buy a home. That's a reality today. Offshore jobs, that's a reality, and certainly not only the fault of the Republican Party. I'm not saying they aren't guilty too, but it's the fault of the political elites. And Charlie Kirk did discuss those issues, and he did provide at least some solutions for some people. That's not what we see among these two, and that's why I call them progressives. That's not what we see. I'm going to play this. I think this is a perfect example of why the left struggles in America. Giridharadas and Ro Khanna.
What do you think are the biggest blind spots of progressives, of Democrats, of the broad political left in general? As you've gone out there, as you've talked to people, what do you think people who might be watching this, who might be big fans of yours, what do you think they're not seeing that maybe you've had a chance to see through some of these interactions across difference?
So let me stop it. So they're talking about, the left-right divide and the, culture wars, and also the popularity of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk, having been assassinated before this interview was conducted by Anand G of Ro Khanna, Congress member Ro Khanna. And so Anand G is saying, hey, what are we missing? What's the situation? How can we maybe reach out to these folks? Which I think is a fair question. That's my view. In fact, I don't just ask it, I say it. I say real clear how we reach out to them. We help them economically. We support policies that will make their lives better, that will clearly, obviously improve the quality of their life, their standard of living, their leisure time, their environment. That's what we should do. Let's hear what Khanna has to say.
The feeling of a lack of respect that people have.
So he goes to a lack of respect. Oh, these people feel like we don't really care. It's not even that we don't care. We don't respect them. We look down on them. Well, you know what? I'm sure that is part of it. I'm not denying it. There's clearly some contempt shown by many on the left. I see it all the time. How could these people be so stupid as to vote for Donald Trump without them ever asking themselves, how could I be so stupid as to vote for Kamala Harris? Or an even better question, how could I be so stupid as to vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016 instead of Bernie Sanders? But they never say that, but they always, how could they be so stupid to vote for Trump? So, yeah, there is a lack of respect. But you know what? People care a lot more than respect if they're having trouble paying the rent, being able to pay the rent. You know what they care more about than respect? If their child is sick and they have to make a choice between a relatively nutritious meal and medication for their child, they care about being able to get the medication for their child. That's the issue. But multi-millionaire Ro Khanna doesn't go there. He talks about respect because guess what? It doesn't cost you a thing, really, to give respect to people. It costs you nothing to say, oh, I respect them.
Who voted for Trump. I mean, as simple as going there and saying, you know what, my family, we wouldn't have had the opportunities we did if you didn't help build the steel, if you weren't in the coal mine.
Isn't that incredibly condescending? There's so much wrong with that answer. Oh, if we just would go to these people in, Akron and say, well, you built those Goodyear tires, so, or, that were on the Model A and Model T, so now we have all this great infrastructure. It's so condescending. There's plenty of people who voted for Trump whose families weren't working in industrial jobs. And there are plenty of people who voted for Harris and who voted for Biden and who voted for Hillary whose families did. So that's not the factor here. But it's easy. It's an easy out to say, well, we just don't respect them. We don't respect their culture. If we just showed respect, they'd vote for they'd vote for the neolibs that we want them to and the neocons that we want them to.
Your grandparents didn't scale the cliffs of Normandy if you didn't help fight the wars, if you didn't help build this country. And I'm deeply proud of all the things that you've done, your family has done, and the rich inheritance both of us have. And here's how I and my family are trying to contribute to that inheritance. I mean,
Barack Obama said something similar to that. I think, he had his One America speech. We're not two Americas, we're one America. And it was a really nice sentiment. I actually liked that speech. But he didn't govern as though we were one America. He governed as though we were indeed two Americas, the elites and everybody else. And the policies that Obama pursued enriched the wealthiest. He bailed out the big banks, for example, not the underwater homeowners. Rather than embracing true single-payer health care or even a public option, which would have started the process of redistributing wealth down, he increased the stranglehold that corporate America has over our health care. He did not dismantle the security state. He enhanced its powers. So we see Democrats, and certainly Republicans too, pursuing policies that reduced the quality of life for the folks that Ro Khanna is talking about. That's why they hate Democrats. Yeah, the respect issue is part of it, but the issue is your policies hurt us, and then you pretend that you're so great. If you want to get those people to vote for you, just support policies that will make their lives better. It's really easy. And the failure to say that is incredibly progressive.
I think a sense of just fundamental respect for them, a sense of understanding of loss, of how many people in this country feel a loss, economic loss, because they don't feel like their kids are going to have the same life, but also a cultural loss.
Yes, that's true. Those people are upset. But why don't you talk about addressing the economic pain? He never does. I looked through it. I'm not going to play the whole thing. He never says one policy that Democrats need to pursue. Just, we should respect it and we should be empathic. No, we should address it. We should solve it. Because you know what? The same problems that those folks in the heartland are facing that you're talking about, he's kind of lumping the Kirk supporters into this big ball. And to a degree, I guess that's fair, but there's so many different Kirk supporters. But okay, to the extent that there's a significant component of Trump and Kirk supporters who are blue collar, who feel left behind, who feel like they aren't being respected, their needs are very similar to the base of the Democrat Party. We've often heard is blacks, right? The base of the Democrat Party is African Americans. So their needs are the same: healthcare, a good job, economic security, affordable housing. You don't need to respect people to make sure that they have enough to live a decent life. I guess you do need to respect them. But if you're going to show respect, that's how you show respect. You don't say, oh, we appreciate your great-grandparents' sacrifice. That's just easy. That's an easy out for a guy in a tailored suit who's making $1 gazillion a year.
Here about the change of that culture. And
all right, so yeah, it's there. Yeah, it doesn't. He's not providing a viable solution, and therefore he'll only make things worse. And what's the saddest of all of this is there is an obvious solution. Democrats must embrace Rooseveltian, Johnsonian economic justice policies. Here's more.
And we're often empathetic to immigrants' cultural loss, right? I mean, I loved reading Jhumpa Lahiri's books about the Indian American experience and how difficult that is. Well, what about the experience from the lens of someone whose town has changed culturally and who's grappling with the same different kind of version of cultural loss, that it's not the same culture and it's a different culture and it's also combined with economic pain? How do we do that in a way that's understanding?
So he's like, we have to understand their pain, but he doesn't say how to address it at no point. At no point. And there's, you know what? The resentment that people have when they're becoming poorer and they're losing what was once a relatively secure space in society, when they're losing that resentment, that ain't going to go away by your patting somebody on the head and saying, yeah, we appreciate it. It must be hard. Must be tough for you. That's not going to help. The way you help it is you actually address the underlying problem. You provide a solution, which, by the way, and I'm going to play a clip in a moment, Charlie Kirk did actually address that. He did, and Ro Khanna is not doing it. And that's why Charlie Kirk was popular.
Empathetic, honest, and also recognizes that cultural loss or cultural change has been combined with an economic loss and economic pain.
All right, so that's just not going to do it. He doesn't provide any policy, any suggestion for how to make things better, actually tangibly better for poor, struggling, and working Americans. And that's why Democrats are losing elections. That's why Democrats, the brand is in the absolute toilet. Now, I didn't like Charlie Kirk. I had some really mean things to say. You know, I described him in a very negative way. And this clip isn't going to change that opinion. But you know what? It explains to me why he had support. Because let's play the clip and you'll hear exactly why I believe he had support. And I want to thank I believe this is from my friend Liz, FOH Liz, friend of Halitics Liz, who posted this. So thank you for that. Let's see if we can get the clip up. Here we go. All right, here we go. Well, it's taking its time getting there.
Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the...
So he's talking about, some 4 very prominent African-American women, and he's saying you can't call them affirmative action picks on the right. You can't do that. Let me play some more of this. And I don't like to play this stuff because I don't like to give it a platform because it's ugly, it's divisive, it's mean-spirited, but they are bold-faced names and, all right, go ahead. Rage on, Charlie.
Racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know.
That's not what they said, obviously. They said, hey, we benefited from affirmative action. We were able to do great things in our lives because of it. And I think that's very fair. I think that's something that, is admirable that they're going to come forward and say that. Kirk is putting a very different and very dark spin on that. But he does provide his followers, if you will, with an actual plan for their lives to get a little better.
I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously.
All right, so it's really ugly what he said. He's saying there about those women that they don't have the brain power, whatever. But it just ugly, racist stuff. But let's continue.
You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously.
So he's saying that those women, Joy Reid, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Michelle Obama, and I think there's a fourth, Sheila Jackson Lee, stole a white person's slot. He's saying, hey, there's a zero-sum game out there. There's only so many places in these institutions and these, in jobs. And because of affirmative action, later on he calls it DEI, those slots aren't going where they should. They're white person slots, like they're entitled to them. They have some sort of right to them. But he's saying we get rid of that, there'll be more slots for white people. And there is a logic to that. If we are living in a zero-sum game society where there's only going to be so many places for people who are at the bottom of the middle or lower end of the ladder, lower half of the ladder, there's only going to be so many slots. And if we have affirmative action, we give those slots to people who are Black, who are women, who are Latino, whatever they are, Native American, then there's fewer for white people. So by taking away the affirmative action, taking away the DEI slots, we're going to provide you, my audience, white people, with more opportunities. Now, that might not be the case because we've seen that Asians, when it comes to these kind of objective criteria like test scores and grades and maybe extracurriculars, I'm not sure about that. But when you look at these objective criteria, those, if you're only going by a meritocracy based on test scores and GPA, difficult course load, et cetera, the white people that seem to be following Kirk might not get them, but he's saying you will. Those are your spaces. Those are your places. That's what you should have. And if we take away the DEI, you'll get them back. That makes sense. That's logical. It's not good. It's not a recipe for a good society. It's a recipe for more fighting, more, more intergroup, interrace, interidentity inequality. That's true. I mean, affirmative action is designed to reduce wealth and income disparities, and I would assume it has some impact. But to the extent it's had impact, that impact has been dwarfed by the massive increases in wealth and income inequality between the richest and everyone else. And in fact, I believe African Americans are now relative to whites in exactly the same place that they were 50, 60 years ago. So it has not in any way reduced wealth and income inequality. Affirmative action has not led to that. And to the extent it may prevent growth in wealth and income inequality, that is offset, right, by the massive increases in the amount of resources that the richest take. So it hasn't been effective. And Kirk is saying, and I think he makes a point. If we didn't have slots for Black people, for Latinos, whatever, then white people would get more of them. Those are your slots. Maybe that's not true, but he is providing a solution, and that is meaningful. Versus what maybe it's a bad meaning, it's a bad outcome. It's not what we want. We don't want a zero-sum game. We want everyone to do better, who's at the bottom. We want a fair and just society. And this is why I have such a huge problem with Charlie Kirk. Not because he was against affirmative action or DEI, I have my problems with it as well, but because he gleefully tears down people in his goal of trying to get, in terms of, to rally or excite his base, rather than saying, no, wait a second. Maybe there are issues that we have to look at when it comes to judging people based on whether they're in this group or that group, rather than saying we should look at people objectively when they apply to schools. But if we're going to do that, then we have to really, really be sure we take care of poverty. We have to make sure that everyone is able to get good, exciting work and has full opportunities academically. Because there's a lot more to academics than just your SAT score. There's a lot more even than your high school GPA. And the disparities that we do see between groups may be caused in part or in whole by very different opportunities at a younger age. So we need to address all of that. Charlie Kirk doesn't talk about that. And neither, by the way, does Ro Khanna. But you know who does? And this is going to end the program. And this is why I think there is a significant growth in podcasting and why we have, more people are watching and listening to and getting information from people like me, is because Hassan Piker, who is extraordinarily successful in this space, he does address the exact issues that helped Charlie Kirk become the influence that he was. And so he writes about this, Hassan Piker, the influencer on the left. And he's not a super left guy either. He was kind of I think he was pretty much a pro Kamala guy, although certainly would have supported Bernie first, I believe. But, then again, Bernie didn't run. Here's what Piker says in diagnosing where we are right now as a nation. It's up here for you. Americans, especially younger ones, feel a sense of growing hopelessness as so many in power refuse to listen to their struggles, economic and otherwise. That's a little bit what Khanna said, right? Well, we have to respect them. But he's saying more. He's saying, no, we don't listen. One side, Democrats, offers mostly platitudes. Isn't that exactly what Khanna did? It's just platitudes. Oh, we need to show respect. While the other, epitomized by Trump, takes advantage of people's resentments, which is exactly what Kirk was doing in that clip. He was taking advantage of the resentments of people who, rightly or wrongly, see their economic dislocation, and mostly wrongly, let's be real clear about this, mostly wrongly, see their economic dislocation as secondary to efforts to help other disadvantaged communities. But it's understandable, isn't it, that they would see it that way. Their lives aren't so great. They're not doing well. They're having trouble getting jobs. They're having trouble getting enough to pay the rent, send their kids to college. And then another group of people that they don't perceive themselves as any worse off, and certainly to the extent if they are worse off, these working class white heartland voters, even if those people are worse off, it's not my fault. I didn't cause these problems for them. So yeah, Kirk says they shouldn't get preferences. We agree. So yes, Kirk did as exactly as Hassan Piker says, took advantage of people's resentments and redirected them at vulnerable communities. And he was an expert at it. Where is the redirection by Ro Khanna of those resentments at the real reason for the dislocations, for the poverty, for the struggles? The real reason, the Wall Street, the private equity people. the tax cutter, the people who cut the taxes on the billionaires, the offshorers. Those are the people who are really responsible. The polluters who've turned what were once, think of the song Ohio, the pleasant countryside's been turned to shopping malls, right? That's Chrissy Hine. Your pleasant countryside turned into a shopping malls by a government that had no pride. So why isn't Ro Khanna using the legitimate anger, the legitimate resentments, and channeling them against the real villains in the piece? But he doesn't do that. We just need to show respect. Well, you show respect as you see your power grow less and less, and our country go full-fledged fascist. That's where we are. It is that simple. It's that tragic. Unless the progressive, because I as much as I want Greens to win, as much as I want us to turn away from this horrible, destructive, Republicratic system, it ain't happening unless somehow Ro Khanna, Zoran Mamdani, and others can channel the legitimate, totally understandable resentments of working class people, channel them against the elites, channel them against the billionaire class, challenge them against the conservatives and corporatists in government. We're going to continue to see everything get worse and worse. And on that note, hey, have a great day. I will be back tomorrow. Thanks so much for being